So our next topic now is of great importance. It's diversity in tech, and we actually have someone on the phone from Paris. So she's the director of the Division for Gender Equality in the Office of the Director General at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. She was a pioneer in making gender equality a priority at UNESCO and has a wealth of experience in international development in areas ranging from socio-economic development, capacity development, agricultural policies, rural development, and gender mainstreaming, among others. So please, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hello, good afternoon.
Mr. Cora, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Please accept my apologies for not being able to join you in person. We have the executive board of UNESCO in session this week, and during that meeting we are not allowed to travel. So I would have loved to be there with you, but I can only participate via this technology.
This is great. Thank you so much for taking the time. So my first question is, you were one of the pioneers, as I just said, in pushing gender as a priority in UNESCO. Can you tell us a little bit about what drives you in your work and what was it like at the time to push such an agenda at the UN?
Well, thank you for the question. As you may know, UNESCO member states, 195 member states of UNESCO, voted unanimously in 2007 to make gender equality one of two global priorities of the organization. This was a landmark decision at the time. This is the period before the establishment of UN Women and before the this upsurge, this interest in promoting gender equality in a very systematic and regular way, both in the UN and outside. So at the time, it was not a very easy undertaking. I think what was really important in my efforts was the fact that there was a lot of data, a lot of empirical evidence that we could use in our advocacy to show that gender inequalities do persist, and they especially were very significant in some of the UNESCO domains, some of the UNESCO program areas. So we were able to show to our member states the importance of addressing the issue of gender inequality, gender disparity in education, in science, in culture, in communication and information. Even today, we are able to use data and empirical evidence and evidence from qualitative studies as well. There are about 750 million illiterate adults in the world as we speak today. 2/3 of this big number is women. According to our most recent Global Education Monitoring Report, as we speak in 2019, there are 132 million girls out of school. In the poorest countries, only 13% of girls who manage to enroll in secondary level complete their education. So these are really very scary numbers, very scary data that pushes us to do more. Both in terms of UNESCO's competence areas, but also in terms of promoting gender equality in all walks of life, in all spheres as UNESCO, because we believe that this is one of the last inequalities, prejudices that remains. And in fact, today, as we see in many parts of the world, there is a strong backlash against gender equality. So it's even more important today that we continue to promote this as an objective and as a value in UNESCO's work.
Thank you for replacing into context. And today we are talking about the future of technology in sustainable development, and we cannot not address the elephant in the room, which is the lack of diversity often in tech. And one question I wanted to ask, many technology innovation have been criticized for having gender bias. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen anymore? Like, how can we address this issue?
That's a very good question. Actually, technology is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it does present many opportunities, But as you correctly point out, there is also significant bias embedded in the algorithms that are used. This is in large part due to the fact that those who are creating the technologies, who are writing the algorithms, are overwhelmingly men and young men, in fact, from privileged backgrounds. The same is true of those using these technologies. The report that I mentioned, UNESCO's 2017 Global Education Monitoring Report, estimates that men are around 4 times more likely than women to have advanced ICT skills. Yet we also know that tech expertise is very important. It's a critical element for job security and decent jobs with good pay. We therefore need to reshape the digital space so that it better reflects the diversity of the world's population. Allow me to talk a little bit about our recent publication, which created a lot of interest and sparked a global conversation on the gendering of AI. It's a report called I Would Blush If I Could. It was developed with the support of the government of Germany and within the framework of a partnership called Equals. And it exposes the particular dangers of women not being involved in tech design and development. In that report, we found that digital gender gaps stem from education systems that channel boys into technology careers while keeping girls in the margins or even entirely out. And despite all the evidence we have today that shows that girls score as well or even higher than boys in computer and information literacy, at least up to adolescence, many girls abandon tech-oriented studies in early secondary school, mostly due to lack of confidence in their abilities and due to peer pressure. By the time they reach higher education, women today make up less than 1/3 of information and communication technology graduates globally. In our report, we also highlighted two important observations. The first observation is about a phenomenon we call the gender equality paradox. We found that countries with the highest levels of overall gender equality often have the lowest percentage of girls' participation in advanced ICT studies. For example, in the United States, only 1 in 4 students pursuing advanced ICT studies is a woman. In Switzerland, this drops to 9%, and in Belgium to 6%. Yet, when we look at countries such as Tunisia, the United Arab Emirates, or Saudi Arabia, we see that they have close to 50% women in their advanced ICT courses. Our second observation related to gender imbalances in the tech sector, and to understand what is at stake if gender imbalances are not addressed, we considered the recent proliferation of digital voice assistants. And we found that tech companies staffed predominantly by young men have given women's voices, women's personalities, and backstories to technology that helps us turn on the lights, set the thermostat, change the music, order food. So we found that not only are these voice assistants largely tolerant of sexual harassment and verbal abuse, but they also send disturbing messages of how women and girls should respond to sexual innuendo and even think about their bodies. So we do believe firmly that more women in the tech sector will be a first step to addressing complex questions about the gendering of the digital space.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important to address all of those issues, and it's very important for you to be here today to address those. I wanted to ask you, which challenges do you see to specifically in maximizing the use of technology innovation in international cooperation for sustainable development?
Well, I mean, as we said before, technology has the power to really radically change the way we live. At the same time, it brings its own challenges, including new forms of violence, to the lives of many girls and women. Again, according to another report we published recently, we found that 73% of women claim that they have been exposed to or experienced some form of violence online, with women in the age group 18 to 24 being at particular risk. We had incidents of women journalists specifically targeted online, targeted by orchestrated trolling and mob misogyny. And most importantly, 2/3 of women feel really powerless in the face of this violence. To highlight this phenomenon, on 8 March this year in 2019, we launched an exhibition of remarkable women in technology, where we wanted to highlight role models, women who are active in this sector and who are developing different applications with the technology. I will mention one of them. We had a team of 5 Kenyan teenagers who called themselves the Restorers. The application they developed was very interesting. It supports the more than 200 million victims of female genital mutilation worldwide, and it also connects them with the physical and mental health resources. There is also a panic button that alerts authorities to dangerous situations. This is an example of technology saving the lives of women and girls. But as we mentioned earlier, not enough women are involved in tech studies and jobs. If we look at the numbers today, let me give you some more data. Less than 1/3 of those working in scientific research and development are women, and even less in frontier technologies. These numbers, also the fact that these numbers are increasing at a very slow pace, is quite alarming. From 2008 to 2016, the percentage of female researchers in STEM worldwide increased by only 4%. This is a very, very small incremental change. In the technology sector, I'm sure you had these numbers mentioned before. I wasn't there, so please forgive me if I'm repeating things that you already discussed. We know that women only make up 17.5% of the tech force and hold only 5% of leadership positions, a staggering figure in 2019. In the G20 countries, women produce only 7% of patents in information and communication technologies. So at UNESCO, we are actively advocating for women and girls to be more confident and to pursue studies in STEM education and careers. We have a range of initiatives in different domains to promote the equal participation of women and girls in developing and using technology for sustainable development. We try to create role models. We also work with governments to make sure that in the school system and in the school curricula, this is an issue that's really looked at carefully and persistently.
Thank you. We had not mentioned those numbers before, and I think it's really important to do so. Apart from highlighting those role models, which are really, really important for young women and girls today, do you have any recommendation to enable the use of tech innovation in sustainable purposes with having gender equality in mind for maybe entrepreneurs, policymakers that are here with us today?
Sure. Actually, our report, the report I mentioned, and I think you can see me, even though
yes,
I cannot see you. So I will just hold up the report so you can see the cover of the report. This is the one I mentioned before. I would blush if I could.
Yes, we see.
In this report, we have a set of recommendations for different stakeholders. We have a series of recommendations for governments, particularly for ministries of education, to see how to give some guidelines about how STEM education, ICT education can be included in curricula, how teachers can be trained, to make sure that they do not unconsciously discriminate against girls in these subject matters, and how we can work with the parents and communities to dispel some of the misconceptions, prejudices in that sphere. But we also have a number of recommendations for the tech sector itself. And I think there are a number of things that can be done on different fronts. One of the follow-up ideas to the report is to organize a meeting at UNESCO in early 2020, where we would try to bring together representatives from the technology sector, from the big companies in that sector, along with government representatives, academic experts, and others who are interested in this subject matter, to see how we can have a dialogue, how we can have a conversation about who can do what. So I hope that in another 6 to 8 months, we will have some roadmaps, maybe some concrete actions to see how we can work in different areas, in our different responsibility areas, to address some of these issues, because technology is moving very fast. It's moving faster than at any other time in our history. And we really have to be careful that advances are for the good of the society, for the good of all. And at UNESCO, as an organization that works on ethics of science, this is an human rights approach to sustainable development, and definitely gender equality as one of our global priorities. We want to make sure that we look at this phenomenon, this development in the same light. So we don't have a blueprint. We don't have all the answers right now. But I think we need to look at this issue in a broader context. And just one point I want to go back to is the issue of illiteracy. Technology innovations must go hand in hand with literacy learning for the marginalized. What is a big problem at the moment is that in low-income countries, adult illiterate women, the number of adult illiterate women has increased by 20 million since 2000. This is an alarming finding because, you know, with all the literacy programs implemented by international organizations, governments, civil society groups, this is a development that is causing a lot of concern. And the investments in adult literacy are very low. We have some data on it. Out of 97 countries for which we have data, we found that half reported less than 0.9% of their education expenditure going to literacy education. So when you have illiterate adults, you know, just imagine how the problem is aggravated, and how it becomes even more difficult to address that.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It was very important, I think, that we talked about this topic. Thank you for joining us from Paris.
Thank you very much, and all the best, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.